When I went to introduce my future husband to my father, I discovered they had already been best friends. What my father revealed about my fiancée knocked me off my feet. Welcome to the channel. Enjoy the video, give it a like, subscribe, turn on notifications, comment and share. The New York City skyline glittered like a sea of diamonds against the velvety night sky. Olivia Reeves stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her father's luxurious penthouse, her silhouette framed by the twinkling lights of skyscrapers that house some of the world's most powerful corporations. The Reeves Technologies building, a gleaming tower of glass and steel, stood proudly among them, a testament to her family's vast wealth and influence. Olivia's reflection stared back at her from the polished glass. At 28, she was the very picture of success, impeccably dressed in a designer gown that cost more than most people's monthly salary, her dark hair swept into an elegant updo, and a fortune in diamonds adorning her neck and ears. Yet, despite all the trappings of wealth surrounding her, an uneasy feeling gnawed at the pit of her stomach. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration, a moment of triumph. She was finally introducing her fiancé, Nathan Cross, to her father, William Reeves. It should have been a joyous occasion, the merging of two brilliant minds, Nathan, the innovative scientist, and her father, the tech mogul who had built an empire from the ground up. Instead, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing on the edge of a precipice, about to tumble into an abyss of secrets and lies. The soft ding of the private elevator pulled Olivia from her thoughts. She turned, her heart racing as the doors slid open to reveal Nathan. He stepped into the penthouse, his presence immediately filling the space. At 38, Nathan cut an impressive figure in his tailored suit, his salt and pepper hair and piercing blue eyes, giving him an air of distinguished maturity. "Olivia," he breathed, crossing the room in a few long strides to take her hands in his. "You look absolutely stunning." His eyes traveled appreciatively over her form, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. She leaned in, inhaling his familiar scent of sandalwood and mint. "I'm so glad you're here," she murmured, trying to keep the tremor from her voice. "Dad should be here any minute." As if on cue, the elevator chimed again. William Reeves, CEO of Reeves Technologies and one of the wealthiest men in America, strode into the penthouse. At 62, he still cut an imposing figure, his silver hair and steel-gray eyes reflecting years of high-stakes business deals and cutthroat corporate maneuvers. "Olivia, darling," William said, embracing his daughter. His eyes then moved to Nathan, and for a split second, Olivia saw something flicker across her father's face. Recognition, shock, and then, was it fear? "Dad, I'd like you to meet Nathan Cross, my fiancé," Olivia said, her voice steady despite the sudden tension in the room. William's face had gone pale, his eyes never leaving Nathan's face. "It can't be," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Nathan stepped forward, extending his hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Reeves," he said smoothly, but Olivia could detect a hint of strain in his voice. William didn't take Nathan's hand. Instead, he stumbled backward, gripping the back of a nearby chair for support. "You're supposed to be dead," he said, his voice hoarse with disbelief. Olivia felt as if the ground had suddenly shifted beneath her feet. "Dad, what are you talking about?" she asked, her gaze darting between her father and her fiancé. Nathan's face had hardened, his jaw clenched tight. "Dad, I think it's time we all sat down," he said, his tone measured but laced with an undercurrent of tension. "There's a lot to discuss." The next few minutes passed in a blur as Olivia mechanically guided them to the sitting area. The plush leather sofas and crystal decanters of aged whiskey seemed to mock the gravity of the moment with their opulence. As they settled into their seats, the weight of unspoken secrets hung heavy in the air. William was the first to break the silence. 15 years ago, he began, his voice low and intense. "Nathan and I were partners. We were on the verge of a breakthrough that would have revolutionized the tech industry and made us billions in the process." Olivia felt her world tilting on its axis. "Partners," she echoed, her mind struggling to process this revelation. "But Dad, you've never mentioned, because I thought he was dead," William interrupted, his eyes never leaving Nathan's face. "There was an explosion in our lab. I barely made it out alive. I thought you had died in the fire." Nathan's laugh was bitter, devoid of humor. "Is that the story you've been telling yourself all these years, William? That I died in some tragic accident?" Olivia's head was spinning. She turned to Nathan, searching his face for answers. What is he talking about? Nathan, please, tell me what's going on. Nathan's eyes softened as they met Olivia's, but there was a steely resolve behind them. I'm sorry, Olivia. I never wanted you to find out like this. But your father isn't telling you the whole truth. William surged to his feet, his face flushed with anger. Don't you dare try to turn this around on me. You betrayed me, stole our research, and disappeared with millions in company funds. The accusations hung in the air like smoke, choking and suffocating. Olivia felt as if she were watching a high-stakes drama unfold, except this wasn't some soap opera. This was her life, and the two men she loved most in the world were at the center of it. Is this true? She asked Nathan, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathan's face was a mask of pain and determination. It's not that simple, Olivia. Yes, I took the research, but only because I knew what your father planned to do with it. The technology we developed, it wasn't just about making money. It had the potential to change everything, to extend human life, perhaps indefinitely. William scoffed. And you didn't think that was worth pursuing? The billions we could have made. This was never about money, Nathan shouted, his composure finally cracking. It was about power. You wanted to control who got access to the technology, to play God with people's lives. Olivia felt as if she were drowning, struggling to keep her head above water in a sea of revelations. What kind of technology are you talking about? She asked, her voice trembling. Nathan took a deep breath, his eyes meeting Olivia's with an intensity that made her shiver. Longevity, he said simply. We discovered a way to potentially halt the aging process at a cellular level. The room fell silent, the implications of Nathan's words hanging heavy in the air. Olivia's mind raced, trying to process the magnitude of what she was hearing. A technology that could extend human life indefinitely. It sounded like something out of a science fiction novel, not the kind of research her father's company would be involved in. That's impossible, she whispered, but even as the words left her mouth, she knew they weren't true. The look in Nathan's eyes, the tension radiating from her father, this was real, and it was big, bigger than anything she could have imagined. William's voice cut through her thoughts, cold and sharp as a blade. It doesn't matter now. What matters is that you stole from me, Nathan. You betrayed my trust and disappeared with research that could have changed the world and made us the wealthiest men on the planet. And that's exactly why I had to take it. Nathan shot back. You were blinded by greed, William. You couldn't see the ethical implications, the potential for abuse. So I couldn't let that technology fall into the wrong hands. Olivia's head was spinning. She stood up abruptly, needing to put some distance between herself and the two men who had suddenly become strangers to her. "Stop it, both of you!" she cried, her voice cracking with emotion. I can't process all of this. Nathan, why didn't you tell me?" Nathan's face softened, regret etched in every line. "I wanted to, Olivia, so many times. I came close to telling you everything, but I was afraid of losing you, afraid of what might happen if the truth came out." "And what is the truth?" Olivia demanded, her eyes flashing with a mixture of anger and desperation. "Because right now I don't know what to believe. My father says you're a thief and a traitor. You say he's driven by greed and willing to play God. How am I supposed to know who's telling the truth?" The tension in the room was palpable, crackling like electricity in the air. William opened his mouth to speak, but before he could utter a word, the sound of breaking glass shattered the silence. In an instant, the penthouse was plunged into chaos. Black-clad figures rappelled through the broken windows, their faces obscured by masks. Olivia screamed as rough hands grabbed her, a cloth pressed against her face. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was Nathan lunging towards her, his face a mask of desperation and fear. When Olivia regained consciousness, she found herself in a dimly lit room that bore no resemblance to her father's luxurious penthouse. The air was damp and cool, with a musty smell that suggested they were underground. As her eyes adjusted to the gloom, she made out the forms of Nathan and her father, both unconscious and bound to chairs nearby. Panic rose in her throat, threatening to choke her. What had happened? Who were those people? And what did they want? As she struggled against her own bonds, a door creaked open, flooding the room with harsh fluorescent light. A figure stepped into the room, and Olivia's breath caught in her throat. It was Dr. Elena Vasquez, her father's chief scientist at Reeves Technologies. But what was she doing here? "Ah, Miss Reeves," Dr. Vasquez said, her voice coolly professional. "I see you're awake. Good. We have much to discuss." Olivia's mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. "Dr. Vasquez, what's going on? Why are we here?" The scientist's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Your father and Mr. Cross have been keeping secrets, Ms. Reeves. Secrets that could change the world and make a fortune for those who control them. It's time those secrets came to light." As Dr. Vasquez moved further into the room, Olivia caught a glimpse of a symbol on the scientist's lapel, a stylized hourglass, the same symbol she had seen on some of her father's most classified documents. With a sinking feeling in her stomach, Olivia realized that the mystery surrounding Nathan and her father was far from over. In fact, it was only beginning to unravel, and she was caught in the middle of a web of secrets, lies, and unimaginable power. The stakes were higher than she could have ever imagined, and as Nathan and her father began to stir, Olivia knew that the next few hours would determine not just their fate, but potentially the future of humanity itself. The fluorescent lights flickered ominously as Dr. Vasquez circled the room, her heels clicking against the concrete floor. Olivia's heart raced, her mind scrambling to make sense of the situation. She glanced at Nathan and her father, both now fully conscious and struggling against their bonds. "What is this, Elena?" William demanded, his voice hoarse. "Have you lost your mind?" Dr. Vasquez laughed, a cold, mirthless sound that sent chills down Olivia's spine. "On the contrary, William, I've never been more clear-headed. You see, I've known about your little secret for quite some time. The longevity project, the billions of dollars funneled into offshore accounts, the human trials conducted in secret facilities across the globe." Olivia's head snapped towards her father, eyes wide with disbelief. "Human trials? Dad, what is she talking about?" William's face had gone ashen, his usual commanding presence diminished by the weight of exposed secrets. "Olivia, Don't bother lying, William," Dr. Vasquez cut in. "Your daughter deserves to know the truth about the illustrious Reeves empire." Nathan spoke up, his voice tight with barely contained anger. "This is exactly why I took the researcher, William. I knew you couldn't be trusted with that kind of power." Dr. Vasquez turned her attention to Nathan, a predatory smile playing on her lips. "Ah, yes, the noble Dr. Cross, sacrificing his career and reputation to save humanity from the big, bad William Reeves. Tell me, Nathan, did you really think you could keep the research hidden forever?" Olivia's mind was reeling. She looked between the three people who had shaped her world: her father, the titan of industry; her fiancé, the brilliant scientist with a mysterious past; and Dr. Vasquez, the trusted colleague who had apparently been plotting behind everyone's backs. Who could she trust her? What was the truth buried beneath all these layers of deception? "Enough games," Olivia said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. "I want answers. All of you, start talking now." For a moment, silence reigned in the room. Then, William sighed heavily, the sound of a man carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. "It started 15 years ago," he began. "Nathan and we stumbled upon something revolutionary, a compound that could potentially halt the aging process at a cellular level. The implications were staggering," Nathan continued, his eyes distant as if lost in the memory. "We could potentially extend human life indefinitely, cure diseases that have plagued humanity for centuries. It was like finding the holy grail of medical science." William nodded. "We knew we had to keep it secret. If word got out, every government, every corporation on the planet would be after us. The potential for misuse was enormous. So you decided to play God yourselves," Dr. Vasquez interjected, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Determine who lives, who dies, who gets to cheat death. It wasn't like that," Nathan insisted. "We wanted to perfect the formula, ensure it was safe before even considering human trials." "But William, he got impatient." Olivia turned to her father, her heart pounding. "Dad, is this true?" William's shoulders sagged, defeat etched in every line of his face. "I saw the potential, Olivia, not just for humanity, but for us. Do you have any idea how much people would pay for the chance at immortality? We could have been the wealthiest family in history. We could have changed the world by experimenting on people." Olivia's voice cracked with emotion. "How could you?" He didn't just experiment, Dr. Vasquez cut in. He sold the incomplete formula to the highest bidders, billionaires, dictators, anyone willing to pay the price. And when the side effects started showing up, side effects, Olivia echoed, a sense of dread washing over her. Nathan's face was grim. The early versions of the formula, they didn't just stop aging. In some cases, they accelerated it. In others, they caused rapid cellular degeneration. People were dying, Olivia. Horrible, painful deaths. Olivia felt sick. She looked at her father, searching for any sign of remorse, any indication that this was all a terrible misunderstanding. But William's face was a mask of stone, his eyes cold and distant. It was a calculated risk, William said, his voice devoid of emotion. Progress always comes at a cost, but the potential benefits... Benefits? Nathan exploded, straining against his bonds. People died, William, and instead of stopping, you just covered it up and kept selling snake oil to desperate billionaires. Dr. Vasquez cleared her throat, drawing everyone's attention. As fascinating as this family drama is, we're on a tight schedule. You see, I represent a group of interested parties who are very eager to get their hands on the perfected formula, and we know one of you has it. Olivia's blood ran cold. The consortium, she whispered, remembering the symbol she had seen on Dr. Vasquez's lapel. Dr. Vasquez's eyebrows shot up. Very good. Miss Reeves. Yes, the consortium, a group of the world's most powerful and wealthy individuals, all united by one goal, immortality at any cost. You're insane, Nathan spat. Even if we had a perfected formula, which we don't, we'd never hand it over to a bunch of power-hungry maniacs. Dr. Vasquez's smile was razor-sharp. Oh, I think you'll find that you will. You see, we have ways of making people talk, and we have all the time in the world. As if on cue, the door opened, and two burly men in black tactical gear entered the room. Olivia's heart leapt into her throat as she saw the array of sinister-looking instruments they carried. Now, Dr. Vasquez said, her voice silky smooth, who wants to go first? The next few hours were a blur of fear, pain, and desperate pleas. Olivia watched in horror as both her father and Nathan were subjected to increasingly brutal interrogation techniques. But despite the pain and the threats, neither man broke. As dawn began to break, casting sickly grey light through a small, high window, Dr. Vasquez's composure finally cracked. "This is impossible," she snarled, pacing the room like a caged tiger. "One of you must have the formula. The consortium's intelligence is never wrong." Olivia, exhausted and terrified, suddenly had a moment of clarity. "Unless," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "the intelligence was deliberately misleading." All eyes in the room turned to her. Dr. Vasquez's gaze was sharp, calculating. "What do you mean?" Olivia's mind raced, piecing together fragments of conversations, subtle clues she had dismissed over the years. "Think about it," she said, her voice growing stronger. "Two brilliant scientists, working on a formula that could change the world. Of course they would have a contingency plan, a way to protect their work if something went wrong." Nathan's eyes widened, a mix of pride and fear crossing his face. "Olivia, don't," but she pressed on, gambling everything on her hunch. "The formula was never complete, was it? You split it. Each of you only has half of the puzzle." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, slowly, William began to laugh. It started as a low chuckle and built to a full-bodied roar that echoed off the concrete walls. "Oh, Nathan," he said, shaking his head. "I always said she was too smart for her own good." Nathan's shoulders slumped in defeat. "I'm sorry, Olivia. We never wanted you involved in this mess." Dr. Vasquez's eyes gleamed with triumph. Well, it seems we've had the wrong approach all along. Gentlemen, I believe it's time for a change of venue. Somewhere more conducive to collaboration." As the guards moved to untie them, Olivia's mind whirled with possibilities. They were no longer just hostages. They were bargaining chips in a high-stakes game of scientific brinksmanship. And somehow, she had to find a way to outsmart some of the most brilliant and ruthless minds in the world. The next thing Olivia knew, they were being hustled onto a private jet, its luxurious interior a stark contrast to the grim laboratory they had left behind. As the plane took off, soaring over the twinkling lights of the city below, Olivia caught her reflection in the window. She hardly recognized the woman staring back at her, disheveled, eyes wild with a mix of fear and determination. "Where are we going?" she demanded. But her question was met with stony silence from their captors. Hours passed, the jet streaking across time zones. Olivia tried to engage Nathan and her father in conversation, hoping to glean some information about their predicament. But both men remained tight-lipped, exchanging significant glances that only deepened her frustration. Finally, the plane began its descent. As they broke through the clouds, Olivia gasped. Below them stretched a vast compound, a sprawling complex of sleek, modern buildings nestled in a lush, tropical landscape. It looked like a cross between a high-tech research facility and a luxury resort. "Welcome," Dr. Vasquez said with a smirk, "to the consortium's primary research facility, your new home for the foreseeable future." As they disembarked, Olivia was struck by the oppressive heat and humidity. Wherever they were, it was a far cry from the cool autumn they had left behind in New York. Armed guards escorted them into the main building, its climate-controlled interior a blessed relief from the tropical swelter. They were led to a state-of-the-art laboratory that would have put even Reeves Technologies' best facilities to shame. Gleaming equipment lined the walls, and holographic displays flickered with complex molecular structures. "Impressive, isn't it?" A new voice, smooth as silk and dripping with authority, cut through the room. A tall, distinguished-looking man in an impeccably tailored suit stepped forward, his silver hair and piercing green eyes marking him as a man of considerable power and influence. "Allow me to introduce myself," he said, his accent hinting at old money and Ivy League education. "I'm Jonathan Blackwell, CEO of Blackwell Pharmaceuticals and current chairman of the consortium. And you, my friends, are going to help us change the world." Olivia felt a chill run down her spine despite the tropical heat. She had a feeling that the real test was just beginning, and the stakes were higher than she could have ever imagined. Jonathan Blackwell's presence filled the room, his charisma almost palpable. He moved with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to power, his gaze sharp and assessing as it swept over Olivia, Nathan, and William. "I must say," Blackwell continued, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth, "I've been looking forward to this meeting for quite some time. The brilliant minds behind the longevity formula, all under one roof. It's a shame it took such extreme measures to bring us together." William, despite his disheveled appearance, managed to summon some of his old boardroom bravado. "If you think we're going to simply hand over our life's work," Blackwell raised a hand, cutting him off. "Please, Mr. Reeves, let's dispense with the posturing. We both know that you're in no position to make demands. However," his tone softened, becoming almost conspiratorial, "I believe we can come to an arrangement that will benefit all parties involved." Olivia felt a flicker of hope. Maybe there was a way out of this nightmare after all, but Nathan's voice, tight with barely contained anger, doused that hope like ice water. "We've seen how the consortium operates, Blackwell. You're not interested in benefiting all parties. You want to control who lives and who dies, to play God with the entire human race." Blackwell's smile never wavered, but his eyes hardened. "Such a limited perspective, Dr. Cross. We're not playing God. We're evolving humanity. Imagine a world where the brightest minds aren't constrained by the ticking clock of mortality, where geniuses like yourselves could work for centuries, solving the greatest challenges facing our species. At what cost?" Olivia found herself speaking up, surprising even herself with the strength in her voice. "Who gets to decide who's worthy of this evolution?" Blackwell turned his attention to her, his gaze appraising. "Ah, the young Ms. Reeves. I've heard much about your intelligence and insight. To answer your question, those who have proven their worth through their achievements, their contributions to society. The leaders, the innovators, the visionaries." "You mean the wealthy?" Olivia countered, her mind racing. "Those who can afford to buy immortality." A flicker of annoyance crossed Blackwell's face, quickly masked by his practiced charm. "Wealth is often a byproduct of great achievement, Ms. Reeves. But I assure you, our vision extends far beyond mere financial gain." Before Olivia could respond, the door to the lab slid open and Dr. Vasquez entered, followed by a team of scientists in pristine lab coats. "Everything is prepared, Mr. Blackwell," she announced. Blackwell nodded, his demeanor shifting from charming host to commanding leader in an instant. Excellent. Dr. Reeves, Dr. Cross, I'm afraid the time for discussion is over. You will work with our team to complete the longevity formula. Refusal is not an option. As if to emphasize his point, armed guards filed into the room, their weapons trained on the captives. Olivia felt her heart racing, her mind scrambling for a way out of this impossible situation. Nathan and William exchanged a long look, years of history and unspoken words passing between them. Finally, William spoke, his voice heavy with resignation. We'll need our own equipment, our own data, everything we had in our original lab. Blackwell's smile was triumphant. Already taken care of. We've recreated your lab environment down to the smallest detail. You'll find everything you need. As they were led deeper into the compound, through corridors lined with cutting-edge technology, and past rooms filled with equipment that looked like it belonged in a sci-fi movie, Olivia's mind was working overtime. There had to be a way out of this, some angle they hadn't considered. They entered a vast laboratory space, easily 10 times the size of the lab at Reeves Technologies. Holographic displays flickered to life as they entered, showing complex molecular structures and data streams that Olivia could barely comprehend. Impressive, isn't it? Blackwell said, gesturing around the room. The culmination of decades of research and billions of dollars in investment. And now, with your expertise, we'll finally unlock the secret to eternal life. Olivia watched as her father and Nathan moved around the lab, their faces a mix of awe and trepidation as they examined the equipment. Despite the circumstances, she could see the spark of scientific curiosity in their eyes. You have 1 week, Blackwell announced. 1 week to combine your research and produce a viable formula. After that, he left the threat hanging in the air, unspoken but clearly understood. As Blackwell and his entourage left the lab, leaving them under the watchful eyes of armed guards, Olivia felt a moment of panic. What could they possibly do in a week? And even if they succeeded, what then? Would Blackwell simply let them go, or were they destined to become permanent guests of the consortium? The next few days passed in a blur of feverish activity. Olivia watched as Nathan and her father worked tirelessly, their old partnership seemingly rekindled by the high-stakes situation. She did her best to assist, her business acumen proving unexpectedly useful in organizing data and managing the workflow. But as the days wore on, Olivia began to notice something odd. Subtle glances between Nathan and William, hushed conversations that stopped abruptly when she approached. They were planning something, she realized, and for some reason, they didn't want her to know about it. On the 5th day, as they broke for a quick meal in the small adjoining break room, Olivia decided she'd had enough of being kept in the dark. All right, she said, her voice low but firm. What's going on? And don't try to tell me it's nothing. I know you two are up to something. Nathan and William exchanged a look, a silent conversation passing between them. Finally, Nathan sighed. We can't tell you everything, Olivia. It's safer for you that way. But we have a plan. William nodded, his eyes darting to the security cameras before leaning in close. We're not giving them the real formula, he whispered. We're creating a decoy, something that looks promising but will ultimately fail. Olivia's eyes widened. Yes, but what about when it doesn't work? They'll kill us. Not if we're not here, Nathan said, a glimmer of his old confidence shining through. We've been working on more than just the formula. We think we've found a way out. Before Olivia could press for more details, the door to the break room opened and Dr. Vasquez entered. Break time's over, she announced curtly. Back to work. As they filed back into the main lab, Olivia's mind was racing. A plan to escape. Their fake formula. It was risky, possibly suicidal. But what choice did they have? The next 2 days were the most intense yet. Olivia watched in amazement as Nathan and her father put on a convincing show of scientific breakthrough, all while laying the groundwork for their escape. She played her part too, feigning excitement over their progress and keeping Dr. Vasquez and the other scientists distracted with questions and requests for obscure equipment. On the evening of the 7th day, just hours before their deadline, Nathan called everyone to the center of the lab. We've done it, he announced, his voice ringing with carefully rehearsed triumph. The formula is complete. The lab erupted into a flurry of activity. Dr. Vasquez immediately began barking orders for final tests and verification procedures. In the chaos, Olivia felt a hand on her arm. It was her father, his eyes intense. "In exactly 30 minutes," he whispered. "Be ready to run." Olivia's heart pounded as she watched the seconds tick by on the lab's digital clock. 29 minutes, 28, 27. At the 15-minute mark, alarms suddenly blared throughout the compound. Red emergency lights began to flash, and the lab's security doors slammed shut with a resounding clang. "What's happening?" Dr. Vasquez demanded, her composure cracking for the first time. As if in answer, Blackwell's voice came over the intercom. Tense and urgent. "Security breach in Sector 7. All personnel. Initiate lockdown procedures immediately." In the confusion that followed, Olivia almost missed her father's signal. A slight nod, a flick of his eyes towards a specific panel on the far wall. She understood immediately. As the scientists and guards were distracted by the alarm and Blackwell's increasingly frantic announcements, Olivia made her way to the panel. With trembling fingers, she input the code she had memorized days ago, praying it would work. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, with a soft hiss, a section of the wall slid open, revealing a narrow passage beyond. "Now!" Nathan's voice cut through the chaos. In a flash, he and William were at her side, pulling her into the secret passage. The panels slid shut behind them, just as shouts of alarm erupted from the lab. They ran through the dimly lit corridor, twisting and turning through what seemed like an endless maze. Olivia's lungs burned, her muscles screaming in protest, but she pushed on, driven by pure adrenaline and the desperate need to escape. Finally, they burst out into the humid night air. The jungle loomed before them, dark and foreboding, but infinitely preferable to the high-tech prison they were leaving behind. "Keep moving," William gasped as they plunged into the undergrowth. "There's a boat waiting, but we have to reach the coast before they realize we're gone." As they crashed through the jungle, the sounds of pursuit growing ever closer, Olivia's mind whirled with questions. How had they planned all this? Where were they going? And most importantly, what would happen when Blackwell and the consortium realized they'd been duped? But there was no time for questions now. There was only the pounding of her heart, the burn of her muscles, and the desperate hope that somehow, against all odds, they would make it out of this alive. After what felt like hours of running, stumbling, and clawing their way through the dense vegetation, they finally broke through to a small, hidden cove. True to William's word, a sleek speedboat was moored there, almost invisible against the dark water. As they scrambled aboard, Nathan quickly went to work on the engine while William scanned the tree line, a stolen pistol gripped tightly in his hand. "We're not safe yet," he warned as the boat's engine roared to life. "The consortium has resources beyond anything you can imagine. They'll be hunting us across every corner of the globe." As the boat sped away from the shore, cutting through the inky black water, Olivia looked back at the island rapidly receding into the distance. The enormity of what had just happened, of how their lives had changed in the span of a week, came crashing down on her. They were fugitives now, running from one of the most powerful and secretive organizations in the world. And somewhere out there was the key to unlocking the secret of immortality, a secret that could change the course of human history forever. As the first rays of dawn began to paint the horizon, Olivia turned to her father and Nathan, her voice barely audible over the roar of the engine and the rush of wind. "What do we do now?" Nathan's eyes met hers, a mix of determination and fear evident in his gaze. "Would we run? We hide, and we figure out how to stop the consortium before they can perfect the formula on their own." William nodded grimly. "It won't be easy. We'll be looking over our shoulders for the rest of our lives. But we have no choice. The fate of humanity is literally in our hands." As the sun rose, casting a golden glow across the vast expanse of ocean before them, Olivia realized that this was just the beginning. The real challenge and the real danger was yet to come. The speedboat cut through the waves, its powerful engine humming as it carried Olivia, Nathan, and William further away from the consortium's island. The rising sun painted the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, a beautiful contrast to the tension that hung heavy in the air. Olivia's mind raced, trying to process everything that had happened in the past week. Her life of luxury and corporate boardrooms seemed a distant memory now, replaced by a world of high-stakes scientific espionage and life-or-death decisions. "We need a plan," she said, breaking the tense silence that had fallen over the boat. "Where are we going? What's our next move?" Nathan, his eyes fixed on the horizon, spoke up. "I have a contact. Someone I trust. Someone who might be able to help us disappear for a while." William's eyebrows shot up. "A contact? Care to share with the class, Nathan?" Nathan sighed, running a hand through his salt-crusted hair. "Her name is Dr. Amelia Chen. We worked together briefly before everything went sideways with the longevity project. She's brilliant, and more importantly, she has connections in the underground scientific community." Olivia frowned. "Underground scientific community? That's a thing." "You'd be surprised," Nathan said with a grim smile. "Durf, there are researchers all over the world working on projects that push the boundaries of ethics and legality. People who believe that scientific progress shouldn't be constrained by bureaucracy or moral hand-wringing. Sounds dangerous," Olivia mused. "It is," William interjected, "but right now dangerous might be exactly what we need." As the sun climbed higher in the sky, they made their way to a small, nondescript fishing village on the coast of what Olivia later learned was Vietnam. They abandoned the speedboat offshore, swimming the last few hundred yards to avoid drawing attention. Dripping wet and exhausted, they stumbled into a dingy hostel on the outskirts of the village. Nathan paid for a room with a wad of cash he'd somehow managed to keep dry, and they collapsed onto the threadbare beds, every muscle aching from their ordeal. "Rest," Nathan said, his voice heavy with fatigue. "I'll make contact with Amelia and arrange our next move." Olivia wanted to protest, to demand more information, but exhaustion won out. She fell into a deep, dreamless sleep, her body finally succumbing to the stress and exertion of the past week. When she awoke, the room was bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. William was snoring softly on the adjacent bed, but Nathan was nowhere to be seen. Panic gripped her for a moment before she noticed a folded note on the rickety bedside table. "Gone to meet contact. Back soon. Stay in the room." Olivia sighed, torn between frustration at being left behind and relief at having a moment to gather her thoughts. She gently shook her father awake, showing him the note. William read it, his brow furrowing. "I don't like this," he muttered. "We should stick together." "I'm sure Nathan knows what he's doing," Olivia said, trying to convince herself as much as her father. "He's been planning this escape for days, maybe longer." They spent the next few hours in tense silence, jumping at every sound from the hallway outside. Olivia's mind kept drifting back to their lavish life in New York, the multi-million-dollar deals and high-society galas that had once been her world. It all seemed so trivial now, in the face of what they'd discovered. Just as the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the dingy room, they heard a soft knock at the door. William immediately tensed, reaching for the stolen pistol, while Olivia's heart raced. "It's me," Nathan's voice came through, low and urgent. "I'm not alone." William nodded to Olivia, who cautiously opened the door. Nathan slipped in, followed by a petite Asian woman with sharp, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Dr. Amelia Chen," Nathan introduced her. "Amelia. This is Olivia Reeves and her father, William." Amelia's eyes darted between them, assessing. "So you're the ones who've got the consortium in such an uproar," she said, her voice tinged with a slight British accent. "Impressive." "We need to move quickly," Nathan said, his tone urgent. "Amelia's arranged transport, but we don't have much time." As they hurriedly gathered their meager belongings, Amelia filled them in on the situation. "The consortium has agents combing every port and airport within a 1,000-mile radius," she explained. "They're pulling strings with local governments, offering obscene amounts of money for information on your whereabouts." Olivia felt a chill run down her spine. The reach of the consortium was even greater than she'd imagined. They slipped out of the hostel under the cover of darkness, making their way through narrow alleys and bustling night markets. Olivia's senses were on high alert, every stranger's face a potential threat. Finally, they reached a small airfield on the outskirts of town. A battered cargo plane stood waiting, its engines already rumbling in preparation for takeoff. "This will take you to a secure location," Amelia said as they climbed aboard. "From there, we can start working on a more permanent solution." As the plane took off, soaring into the night sky, Olivia felt a mix of relief and apprehension. They had escaped the immediate danger, but she knew this was just the beginning of their ordeal. The flight was long and uncomfortable, the cargo hold barely heated and filled with the smell of machine oil and sweat. They dozed fitfully, taking turns keeping watch despite Amelia's assurances that the pilot was trustworthy. Hours later, they touched down on a remote airstrip surrounded by dense forest. As they disembarked, Olivia was struck by the crisp, cool air, a stark contrast to the tropical humidity they'd left behind. "Welcome to Switzerland," Amelia said, leading them towards a waiting SUV. More specifically, welcome to one of the most secure private research facilities in the world. As they drove through winding mountain roads, Amelia explained that the facility belonged to a reclusive billionaire scientist who shared her distrust of organizations like the Consortium. It was a place where researchers could work on cutting-edge projects away from prying eyes and corporate interests. When they finally arrived at the facility, Olivia was awestruck. Nestled in a picturesque alpine valley was a sprawling complex of sleek, modern buildings that seemed to blend seamlessly with the natural surroundings. Solar panels and wind turbines dotted the landscape, providing clean energy to power the state-of-the-art labs within. "It's incredible," she breathed, taking in the view. Amelia smiled, a hint of pride in her voice. "It's home. And for now, it's your sanctuary." The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. Nathan and William threw themselves into their work, using the facility's advanced equipment to reconstruct their research from memory. Olivia, feeling somewhat out of her depth among the scientists, focused on analyzing the Consortium's global operations. Using her business acumen to track financial transactions and corporate structures. But as the days wore on, a gnawing sense of unease began to grow in Olivia's gut. Something about the facility, about Amelia's willingness to help them, didn't quite add up. She caught glimpses of other research projects that seemed just as ethically questionable as the longevity formula, and there were areas of the complex that remained off-limits, guarded by stern-faced security personnel. One evening, as she was poring over financial reports in her quarters, there was a soft knock at her door. It was Nathan, looking haggard and conflicted. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Not here. Meet me by the lake in an hour. Come alone." Olivia's heart raced as she made her way through the moonlit grounds an hour later. Nathan was waiting for her at the water's edge, his face half hidden in shadow. "What's going on?" she asked, shivering slightly in the cool night air. Nathan took a deep breath. "We've made a terrible mistake, Olivia. This place, it's not what we thought it was." "What do you mean?" "I've seen things," Nathan said, his voice trembling slightly. "Experiments that go far beyond anything the Consortium was doing. They're not just working on longevity here. They're trying to reshape the very foundations of human biology." Olivia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. "Are you saying we've jumped out of the frying pan into the fire?" Nathan nodded grimly. "We thought we were escaping one group of power-hungry elites, only to land in the clutches of another, and I'm afraid they may be even more dangerous than the Consortium." "We have to leave," Olivia said, her mind already racing through possible escape routes. "It's not that simple," Nathan replied, frustration evident in his voice. "They have fail-safes, contingencies. And your father, I think he might be in too deep already." Olivia's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" Nathan hesitated, clearly wrestling with how much to reveal. "William's been spending a lot of time in the restricted areas. I think he's been offered something that's making him reconsider everything." "No," Olivia whispered, shaking her head in denial. "He wouldn't. Not after everything we've been through. Power is a hell of a drug, Olivia. And the promise of eternal life. Well, that's the most potent drug of all." As they stood there by the moonlit lake, the weight of their situation pressing down on them, Olivia realized that their ordeal was far from over. They had escaped one trap only to stumble into another, potentially even more dangerous one. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathan's eyes met hers, filled with a mixture of determination and fear. "We find a way out. We expose both the Consortium and this place for what they really are, and we make sure that the longevity formula never falls into the wrong hands, even if that means destroying it forever." As they made their way back to the facility, Olivia's mind whirled with possibilities and dangers. She had entered this world of high-stakes science and shadowy organizations as a naive outsider. Now, she realized, she would have to become a player in this deadly game if they were to have any hope of survival. The moon hung low over the mountains, casting long shadows across the valley. In the distance, the lights of the research facility glowed like a beacon that now seemed more ominous than welcoming. Olivia took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. The game had changed, the stakes had risen, and the true battle for the future of humanity was about to begin. The following days were a delicate balancing act for Olivia. On the surface, she maintained the facade of a grateful guest, working diligently alongside her father and Nathan. But beneath that veneer, her mind was constantly racing, observing, analyzing every detail of their new environment. She began to notice things she had overlooked before. The way certain researchers would clam up when she entered a room. The frequent, hushed conversations between Amelia and a group of stern-looking individuals who seemed to hold some authority in the facility. And most troublingly, the growing distance between her and her father. William Reeves had always been driven, often to the point of obsession. But now there was a fervor in his eyes that Olivia had never seen before. He spent long hours in the restricted areas of the facility, emerging looking simultaneously exhausted and exhilarated. One evening, as Olivia was making her way back to her quarters, she overheard a heated conversation coming from one of the labs. Pressing herself against the wall, she strained to listen, pushing the boundaries too far. Nathan's voice, tense and angry. "This goes beyond anything we ever envisioned." "That's precisely the point," William replied, his tone dismissive. "We were thinking too small before. With the resources here, we can achieve things we never dreamed possible." "At what cost?" Nathan demanded. "Have you seen what they're doing in Lab 7? It's not just about extending life anymore. They're trying to reshape human biology at its core." There was a long pause before William spoke again, his voice low and intense. "Sometimes, to make an omelette, you have to break a few eggs." Olivia's blood ran cold. This wasn't her father speaking. This was someone else. Someone consumed by the promise of power and eternal life. She slipped away before they could discover her eavesdropping, her mind whirling. She needed to act, and soon, but she couldn't do it alone. The next morning, Olivia cornered Nathan in one of the less frequented corridors. "We need to move," she whispered urgently. "Whatever's happening here, it's changing my father. We have to get out and expose this place before it's too late." Nathan nodded grimly. "I've been working on something. A way to transmit all the data we've gathered to multiple secure servers around the world. If we can get that information out, it could blow the lid off both the consortium and this facility." "How long do you need?" Olivia asked. 2 days, Nathan replied. "Maybe 3, but we'll have to be careful. I don't think we're the only ones with plans in motion." Over the next 48 hours, Olivia threw herself into her work with renewed vigor, all while covertly gathering as much incriminating information as she could. She chatted up other researchers, piecing together fragments of conversations to build a clearer picture of the facility's true purpose. What she discovered chilled her to the bone. The longevity formula was just the tip of the iceberg. There were projects dedicated to enhancing human strength and intelligence, to manipulating memories, even to controlling minds. It was as if every sci-fi nightmare had been rolled into one and given unlimited funding. On the evening of the second day, as Olivia was making her way to meet Nathan, alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. Red emergency lights bathed the corridors in an eerie glow as a calm voice came over the intercom. "Security breach in Sector 5. All personnel initiate lockdown procedures immediately." Panic gripped Olivia as she raced through the halls, searching for Nathan. Had they been discovered? Was this part of the plan? She found him in one of the main labs, furiously typing at a computer terminal. "What's happening?" she demanded. "It's not us," Nathan said, his eyes never leaving the screen. "Someone else made a move, but this might be our only chance. I'm initiating the data transfer now." As Nathan worked, Olivia kept watch at the door, her heart pounding. In the distance, she could hear shouts and the sound of running feet. Suddenly, the lab door burst open. Olivia whirled around, expecting to see security forces. Instead, she found herself face to face with Amelia Chen, looking disheveled and wild-eyed. "We have to go," Amelia said urgently. "Now, they know about the formula." "Who knows?" Olivia demanded. "What's going on?" Amelia's laugh was bitter. "Everyone. The consortium, the government, rival research groups. Someone leaked information about what we've been working on here. The whole world is about to descend on this facility." Nathan looked up from the computer. The transfer's complete. We need to destroy this terminal and any backups. As they worked quickly to erase all traces of their presence, Olivia's mind raced. Wait, she said suddenly. Where's my father? A look passed between Nathan and Amelia, heavy with meaning. William made his choice, Amelia said softly. He sided with the facility's leadership. They're planning to use the chaos as cover to escape with the most valuable research. Olivia felt as if the floor had dropped out from under her. Her own father, abandoning her for the promise of power and immortality. It was almost too much to bear. But there was no time for emotional breakdowns. The sounds of conflict were growing closer, and they needed to move. Amelia led them through a maze of back corridors and hidden passages. There's a helicopter on the roof, she explained as they ran. It's our best chance of getting out of here alive. As they emerged onto the rooftop, the full scale of the chaos became apparent. The night sky was lit up with explosions and gunfire. It looked like a war zone, with multiple factions fighting for control of the facility and its precious secrets. They sprinted for the waiting helicopter, ducking as stray bullets whizzed overhead. Just as they reached the aircraft, a familiar voice called out, "Olivia?" She turned to see her father standing by the roof access door, flanked by armed guards. William Reeves looked nothing like the man she had known all her life. There was a wild, almost manic gleam in his eyes, and he clutched a metallic briefcase to his chest, as if his life depended on it. "Dad!" Olivia's voice cracked with emotion. "What are you doing? Come with us." William shook his head, a sad smile playing on his lips. "I can't. Sweetheart, this is bigger than all of us, the work we're doing here, and it will change the world." "It will destroy the world," Olivia shouted over the noise of the helicopter's rotors starting up. "Please, Dad, it's not too late." For a moment, something flickered in William's eyes, a hint of the father she had known and loved. But then it was gone, replaced by that terrifying determination. "I'm sorry, Olivia," he said, "but this is the future, and I have to be part of it." With that, he turned and disappeared back into the facility, the armed guards forming a protective barrier around him. Olivia felt Nathan's hand on her arm, pulling her into the helicopter. As they lifted off, she caught one last glimpse of her father through a window, watching them leave with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. The helicopter banked sharply, narrowly avoiding a missile that streaked past them. Olivia gripped her seat, her knuckles white, as Amelia skillfully piloted them away from the chaos. As the research facility receded into the distance, eventually obscured by the rugged Swiss landscape, Olivia felt a complex mix of emotions washing over her. Relief at their escape, fear of what was to come, and a deep, aching sorrow for the father she had lost, not to death, but to the seductive promise of power and immortality. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the roar of the engines. "I have a safe house," Amelia replied, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "A place off the grid where we can regroup and plan our next move." Nathan, looking pale and shaken, spoke up. "The data we sent out, it's going to cause a firestorm. Governments, corporations, research institutions, they'll all be scrambling to make sense of it. And they'll be looking for us." Olivia nodded grimly. They had just painted targets on their backs, becoming some of the most wanted individuals on the planet. But they had also taken the first step towards exposing the truth and potentially saving humanity from a future where immortality was a commodity controlled by the wealthy and powerful. As the first rays of dawn began to paint the sky, Olivia's mind turned to the challenges that lay ahead. They would need to stay hidden, to sift through the mountain of data they had stolen, and to find a way to use that information to bring down both the consortium and the facility they had just fled. But more than that, they needed to grapple with the ethical implications of their discoveries. The longevity formula, and all the other advancements they had uncovered, had the potential to revolutionize human existence. But at what cost? And who could be trusted with such power? These were questions that would shape the future of humanity, and Olivia realized with a mix of terror and determination that she was now at the center of it all. The naive corporate heiress was gone, replaced by a woman who had seen the darkest side of human ambition and lived to tell the tale. As the helicopter flew on towards an uncertain future, Olivia made a silent vow. She would find a way to stop those who would abuse the power of science for their own gain. She would expose the truth, no matter the personal cost. And somehow, someday, she would find a way to save her father from the monster he had become. The sun rose higher, casting a golden glow across the majestic alpine landscape. It was a new day, the start of a new chapter in a story that would reshape the world, and Olivia Reeves, once a bystander in the game of power and science, was now one of its key players. Little did she know that the true test of her resolve was yet to come, and that the lines between ally and enemy, right and wrong, would soon become blurrier than she could have ever imagined. The safe house turned out to be a modest chalet, nestled in the remote French Alps, far from prying eyes and advanced technology. As Amelia guided the helicopter to a landing in a hidden clearing, Olivia felt a mix of relief and trepidation. They were safe for now, but she knew this respite would be brief. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. Olivia, Nathan, and Amelia worked tirelessly, sifting through the mountain of data they had stolen from the Swiss facility. The more they uncovered, the more horrified they became. "It's worse than we thought," Nathan said one evening, his face illuminated by the glow of his laptop screen. The longevity formula was just the beginning. They were working on ways to enhance human capabilities beyond anything we've ever seen. Increased strength, heightened intelligence, even a form of mind control. Olivia shuddered, remembering the manic gleam in her father's eyes. "Is that what happened to my dad? Did they change him somehow?" Amelia shook her head, her expression grim. "I don't think so. At least, not physically. But the promise of that kind of power, it can change a person just as effectively as any drug or genetic modification." As they delved deeper into the research, a troubling pattern began to emerge. The consortium wasn't the only player in this high-stakes game. Governments, rival corporations, even religious organizations, all were vying for control of the technology that could reshape humanity. "We can't let any of them have this," Olivia said firmly. "The potential for abuse is too great." Nathan nodded in agreement. "But how do we stop it? We're just 3 people against some of the most powerful organizations in the world." It was Amelia who provided the spark of an idea. "We don't have to fight them directly," she said, her eyes gleaming with a mix of excitement and apprehension. "We can turn them against each other." And so began Operation Pandora's Box. Using the vast trove of data at their disposal, they began to strategically leak information to various interested parties. A hint of breakthrough research to one government, evidence of ethical violations to a rival corporation, promises of unimaginable power to shadowy billionaires. Olivia's years in the corporate world proved invaluable as she crafted messages designed to inflame rivalries and paranoia. Nathan's scientific expertise allowed them to tantalize their targets with just enough real information to make their deceptions believable. And Amelia's network of contacts in the underground scientific community helped spread their carefully constructed web of lies and half-truths. As weeks turned to months, their plan began to bear fruit. News reports spoke of increased tensions between nations, of corporate espionage reaching unprecedented levels. The scientific community was in an uproar, with accusations of ethical breaches flying in all directions, but it wasn't enough. The major players were still out there, still pursuing the secrets of longevity and human enhancement, and looming over it all was the specter of William Reeves and whatever faction he had aligned himself with. "We need to draw them out," Olivia said one night, pacing the small living room of their chalet. "Force them into the open where the world can see what they're really up to." It was a risky plan, but they all knew it was necessary. Using themselves as bait, they orchestrated a series of public appearances, each one designed to attract the attention of their enemies. The cat-and-mouse game that followed was nerve-wracking. They stayed one step ahead of their pursuers, moving from city to city, always watching over their shoulders. But with each close call, each narrow escape, they gathered more information, piecing together the vast conspiracy that threatened to reshape humanity. It all came to a head in New York City, in the very building where Olivia had once ruled as a corporate princess. Reeves Technologies, once a beacon of innovation, now stood as a fortress of secrets and lies. Under the cover of night, Olivia, Nathan, and Amelia infiltrated the building. Their goal, to access the secure servers in the heart of the complex and broadcast the truth to the world. As they made their way through familiar corridors, now eerily deserted, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. Her instincts proved correct when they reached the main server room and found it occupied. William Reeves stood there, flanked by armed guards and a group of individuals Olivia recognized from news reports and corporate dossiers. Leaders of industry, heads of state, people who collectively held the fate of billions in their hands. "I've been expecting you," William said, his voice unnaturally calm. "I must say I'm impressed by how much trouble you've caused us. You always were a quick study, Olivia." Olivia's heart raced, but she kept her voice steady. "It's over, Dad. We're exposing everything. The world will know what you've been doing." William's laugh was cold, devoid of any warmth or humanity. "Oh, my dear, you still don't understand, do you? The world will thank us for what we're doing. Imagine a future without disease, without aging, where human potential is truly unlimited." "At what cost?" Nathan interjected. "A world where only the elite have access to these advancements, where the gap between the haves and have-nots becomes an unbridgeable chasm. Sacrifices must be made for progress," one of the other figures said smoothly. "Surely, as scientists, you understand this." Amelia stepped forward, her eyes blazing with anger. "What you're doing isn't science. It's playing God with no regard for the consequences." As the argument escalated, Olivia noticed something odd. Her father kept glancing at a particular server bank, his hand twitching as if fighting the urge to reach for something. In a flash of insight, she understood. The key to everything, the complete formula, the full scope of the research, it was all there, within reach. What happened next was a blur of action. Nathan, sensing Olivia's realization, created a distraction by overloading one of the electrical panels. In the chaos that followed, Olivia made a dash for the server. Her fingers flew over the keyboard, years of tech industry experience guiding her actions. She found what she was looking for, a hidden partition, locked behind layers of security that would have taken days to crack. But she had an advantage. She knew her father, knew the way his mind worked. The password, when it came to her, was almost too simple: Olivia's birthday. As the files began to download, Olivia felt a presence behind her. She turned to find her father standing there, his expression a mix of pride and sorrow. "You really are extraordinary, you know," he said softly. "I always knew you were destined for greatness." "Dad," Olivia pleaded, "it's not too late. Help us make this right." For a moment, she saw a flicker of the man she had known and loved, but then his expression hardened. "I'm sorry, Olivia, but the future waits for no one." He reached for the server, but Olivia was faster. With a swift motion, she initiated the final protocol Nathan had prepared, a virus designed to corrupt the data beyond recovery. Alarms blared as the virus spread through the system. On screens around the room, years of research, the key to unnaturally extended life, began to dissolve into meaningless strings of code. "No!" William's anguished cry was drowned out by the sound of approaching sirens. The other leaders were already fleeing, their grand plans for a controlled evolution of humanity crumbling around them. In the confusion, Olivia, Nathan, and Amelia managed to slip away. As they emerged onto the street, where crowds were already gathering in response to the commotion, Olivia felt a weight lift from her shoulders. "It's done," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's really over." Nathan squeezed her hand. "Not quite. We still have a lot of work to do." He was right, of course. The immediate danger had passed, but the ripple effects of their actions would be felt for years to come. There would be investigations, trials, a complete restructuring of the scientific community and how it was governed. And for Olivia, there was the personal cost to consider. She had lost her father not to death but to an obsession with power and immortality. The Reeves family name, once associated with innovation and progress, would now be linked to one of the greatest scandals in scientific history. But as they walked away from Reeves Technologies for the last time, blending into the crowd of curious onlookers, Olivia felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. They had taken on forces that had seemed invincible and emerged victorious. They had protected humanity from a future where immortality was a commodity controlled by the elite, and in doing so, they had paved the way for a new era of scientific research, one guided by ethics and transparency, rather than greed and secrecy. Months later, as Olivia testified before a global committee on scientific ethics, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. From privileged heiress to fugitive, from bystander to key player in a struggle for the future of humanity. "The pursuit of knowledge is one of humanity's noblest endeavors," she said, her voice ringing out in the packed auditorium. "But with great knowledge comes great responsibility. We must ensure that the power to reshape life itself never falls into the hands of those who would abuse it." As she stepped down from the podium, met by thunderous applause, Olivia caught sight of Nathan and Amelia in the crowd. They had been through hell together, had seen the darkest side of human ambition, and had emerged stronger for it. There was still much work to be done. Rogue elements of the consortium and other organizations were out there, pursuing forbidden research in hidden corners of the globe. The temptation of eternal life and superhuman abilities would always be a siren call to those hungry for power. But Olivia was ready for the challenge. She had found her true calling, not as a corporate leader or even as a scientist, but as a guardian of humanity's future. A role that would require all of her intelligence, her courage, and her hard-won wisdom. As she left the auditorium, stepping out into a bright new day, Olivia felt a sense of purpose that filled her entire being. The world had changed, and she had changed with it. The story of the longevity formula and its aftermath would be told for generations to come. But for Olivia Reeves, Nathan Cross, and Amelia Chen, it wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with new challenges, new discoveries, and the eternal struggle to ensure that the power of science was used for the benefit of all humanity, not just a privileged few. The sun shone brightly overhead, a fitting symbol for the dawn of a new era. An era that Olivia and her allies had fought so hard to bring about. An era of hope, of ethical progress, and of a future where the greatest scientific discoveries would be shared by all. As they walked away from the auditorium towards whatever challenges awaited them next, Olivia allowed herself a small smile. They had faced the abyss, had grappled with temptations that would break most people, and had emerged with their humanity intact. Whatever came next, she knew they would face it together. Not as the naive individuals they had once been, but as battle-hardened guardians of a future where science served humanity, not the other way around. The adventure, it seemed, was far from over, but Olivia Reeves was ready for it, armed with knowledge, conviction, and the unshakable belief that in the end, truth and justice would prevail.